Hook. Generosity is a virtue, a quality most of us admire. But what happens when that generosity becomes a predictable liability? This is a story about a meal between friends, a habit that refuses to die, and a conflict that comes to a head in the quiet darkness of a car ride home. It's a story that asks a difficult question. When does an act of kindness cross the line into frustrating self-sabotage? And who has to pay the price? Story. Our storyteller has a girlfriend with a heart of gold. It's one of the things he loves about her. But one of her most ingrained qualities has become a quiet, recurring source of tension in their relationship. Whenever they go out to eat, without fail, she offers her food to everyone at the table. It doesn't matter who they're with, or what she ordered. The offer is always made. He'd asked her about it before. Her explanation was simple and sweet. It was just how she was raised. Her family taught her to always make sure everyone else was taken care of before she even thought about taking her first bite. It was a gesture of community, of care. He understood that. He even told her it was admirable. But he also tried to gently explain that in their circle of friends, it wasn't necessary. No one will judge you, he'd say, for just eating the meal you ordered. They have their own. But the habit was deep-seated. And it wasn't just for easily shareable items like fries or an appetizer platter. She would offer bites of her personal, single-serving meal. A spoonful of her soup. A forkful of her pasta. A direct bite out of her burger. Beyond the simple hygiene factor that made him cringe, watching a friend's used fork dive into his girlfriend's dinner, there was a much bigger problem. And that problem had a name: Brian. Brian was one of his best friends. He was a genuinely great guy, reliable, loyal, and someone you could count on in a crisis. But Brian had a blind spot, a troublesome and all-consuming relationship with food. He seemed to operate with zero self-control and even less social awareness when it came to a dinner table. To Brian, the phrase, "help yourself," was not a polite invitation to take a sample. It was a literal command to eat as much as he wanted, with no regard for anyone else. The storyteller had seen it happen countless times. A shared appetizer plate would arrive for a table of 4. The others would be talking, laughing, politely taking 1 or 2 pieces at a time. Brian, meanwhile, would systematically demolish 90% of the plate, seemingly under the assumption that if others weren't actively eating, they must not be hungry. Now, you might be thinking this is just a minor annoyance. But there was a financial component that grated on our storyteller. Brian was almost always broke. When the bill came, his understanding of restaurant economics was creative. If an item was listed on the menu for $11.99, Brian would confidently toss exactly $12 into the pile, completely ignoring tax and tip, and consider his debt settled. This meant others were constantly covering his share, a small tax for his friendship. Because of all this, the storyteller had specifically warned his girlfriend about Brian. He'd had a direct conversation with her more than once. He explained that while her generosity was wonderful, offering food to Brian was like throwing a steak to a starving wolf. It would be gone in an instant, and she would be left with nothing. He asked her, pleaded with her, to please avoid offering her meal when Brian was at the table. Which brings us to last night. They were out with a group of friends, including Brian. The food arrived. His girlfriend's plate was set down in front of her, a beautiful, steaming portion of pasta she had been looking forward to. And then, like clockwork, she turned to the table. "Does anyone want to try some?" she asked with a smile. Our storyteller felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't want to cause a scene or embarrass her in front of their friends. So he did the only thing he could. He gave her a gentle nudge under the table. A small, desperate signal. "Please, not this time. Not with him here." She glanced at him, registered his silent plea, and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug in return. The offer stood. The outcome was as predictable as the sunrise. Brian, having already inhaled his own substantial meal, happily accepted her offer. His fork plunged into her pasta again, and again, and again. The rest of the table politely declined, but Brian took enough for everyone. The storyteller watched as his girlfriend's dinner dwindled to just a few sad-looking strands at the bottom of the bowl. She never said a word. She just smiled and continued to participate in the conversation, as if her disappearing meal was of no consequence. Later, on the way home, the silence in the car was thick. It was his girlfriend who broke it. "Hey," she said softly, "would you mind stopping at a drive-thru?" I'm still kind of hungry. I didn't really get much to eat. That was the spark. The frustration he'd been swallowing all night finally spilled over. You should have just eaten the food you ordered, he said, his voice flatter and colder than he intended. This is exactly what I warned you about. You've seen how Brian is with food. You can't act surprised that he ate your entire dinner when you offered it to him. He could feel the atmosphere in the car shift from quiet to tense. He did stop. He pulled into a fast food place and bought her a burger and fries. But as they waited for the food, he couldn't let it go. I just don't enjoy paying for Brian's meal, he added, the resentment clear in his voice. Because that's what happened tonight. He ate your expensive pasta, and now I'm buying you a second dinner. He knew he had been harsh. He could see it in the way she stared out the passenger window, refusing to look at him. She didn't call him a jerk or an asshole. She didn't say anything at all. But her silence was heavy, filled with disappointment. Now, they are in a standoff. The air between them is thick with unspoken words, and both of them are waiting, stubbornly, for the other to be the first to apologize. Verdict. This is a classic case of a good intention leading to a frustrating, repetitive outcome. The girlfriend's impulse to share is born from a place of kindness and a deeply ingrained upbringing. It's hard to fault someone for being generous. However, generosity without boundaries can become a problem, especially when it consistently leaves her hungry and her partner feeling financially burdened. The storyteller's frustration is completely understandable. He saw the problem, communicated it clearly and repeatedly, and offered a reasonable solution. Simply don't offer food to the